All right, we're recording. This is office hours for service APIs on June 24. This year is flying by. All right, so I know Harry had an update he wanted to give on TLS, but maybe we'll bump that down a bit just because there's not too many people here yet. And we'll move PR review up a bit and leave some time at the end to go through. Does that sound all right, Harry?
Yep, totally fine.
Great, okay. With that said, I know there's a bunch of PRs that could use some attention here. So I wanted to spend a bit of time on this. We haven't had much time in office hours recently to go through and just talk about PRs together. Just looking at who's here, maybe we can pick PRs from people that are on this call right now to start with. Harry, it looks like this is approved and just needs an LGTM. Is that accurate?
Yes, yeah. So I know you had some comments on it.
Yeah.
And Boy approved it today. I made those comments earlier today.
Okay, so these are resolved too.
Yep,
okay.
Yep.
Cool. And this is really just making host names pluralized. Okay.
Yeah.
That seems straightforward enough to me. I do remember reviewing this earlier. Anyone have any additional thoughts, or should I just go ahead and LGTM this one? All right, well, away we go. Cool. All right, we'll go on to, Harry, do you have any other ones that are currently open?
No, that's the only one for now.
Okay, well, awesome. Well, I'll be selfish then and go through my own. I think this one has already been LGTM'd. I have had bad luck with rebasing after LGTM and, whatever. So I think I just need to go back through and rebase one more time, and hopefully we can catch approval at just the right point to make this work. I think this was a fairly non-controversial one. So yeah, I will leave that be for now. Are there any other PRs that we're aware of that we should be looking at here? I know James was the one who originally had this idea to do PR review. I guess we could look at some of his PRs here. I know he has a few. Bowie, I think you had reviewed this status and I guess a few people have reviewed this one. Oh yeah, and I had a review pending and I didn't submit it. Oops. Okay, is there anything else we need to discuss on this one? Let's see. Yeah, I think this all seems fine to me. And there was this big discussion about a named address, and I think we just decided it was out of scope, but certainly something that we want some kind of DNS entry or something here that can help us represent the AWS load balancers.
Yeah, I'll follow up with that once this is in. I discussed it with James the other time as well.
Okay.
I think that should be pretty similar to how we have that info in the service of type load balance. So it should be straightforward, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. Well, maybe we don't have that many PRs to go through. Oh well, this would be good to get a wider audience on. John is not here, but we've had some discussions about whether or not we should generate our own client lister and informers. This PR looks massive because it hasn't been rebased after vendor was removed and dependencies were updated. I think this will end up being significantly smaller diff once this is rebased on those. with that said,
So-
this opens up a broader conversation of if this is something we want to move forward with. And I think that was Bowie. So
Yeah,
Bowie.
one interesting thing that John brought up that wasn't apparent to me was that because is my audio okay?
Yeah, you're great.
Okay, because the dynamic client has performance issues because the cache stores like unconverted types or something. I didn't realize that that was the case. I don't know if any of the folks on the call have run into this at all.
No, we've moved to the dynamic client for everything for Contour, but we haven't seen any performance issues because, I mean, Contour is generally not dealing with a lot of objects. So the size of the cache is probably not too important for us.
That makes sense.
Question I had was like, is it necessary to actually move to dynamic client, or this form will always be supported upstream? Maybe not a question for this audience.
Yeah, I mean, so there's an upstream issue on KubeBuilder. Yeah, KubeBuilder moved away from including client gen as part of KubeBuilder. And so there was some discussion on why. And part of that, as I recall, was, I don't have the issue right now. I'm not sure if it's referenced here. But yeah, there was discussion on why. And part of that was, well, you could just use dynamic client. And the other, and I think there was a question about if we could just generate our own client gen list or whatever. And it sounds like they don't mind. There's nothing against using your own custom client gen, your own custom generated client and lister and informers. They just didn't want to maintain it. That's my recollection of that issue. I know at least Bowie has read through that issue and commented on it. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, we pinged Solly, I forget his last name, directly, Solly Ross. Yeah. As one of the people who works on that. And basically they were like, well, you could do this, but it won't be supported in KubeBuilder, and this is a little bit finicky. So it sounded like it would keep working. No one said that it was going to kind of stop working.
Okay, so in that case, I guess it's more of a personal preference thing, but I prefer using these clients and listers than the dynamic client. So if it is still up for discussion, I think maybe we should include it for now. This dynamic client is not.
Yeah, I like these as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I had a thing
Okay.
open earlier to do this thing that John was talking about, and yeah, the only reason I didn't was because it seemed like everybody was moving to the dynamic client. But if there are performance issues, then absolutely we should do this.
Okay, it seems like I can take a look and see if this is just mergeable. I'll ask him to, well, it's definitely not mergeable. He has to like redo the commit. I'll follow up with John.
He would definitely get all kinds of lines of code out of this one. It's impressive. All right, cool. Let me see what else we have going on. Dependencies update. I think this was pretty non-controversial as well. It's got an LGTM, yeah, from James, and I think myself, yeah.
Okay, yeah, we can merge that one. Let me look at it.
Okay. Cool. And okay, are there any other PRs we want to cover here before we move into the rest of the content? All right. I will take that as a win. I know Harry had updated the TLS config proposal that he'd worked on. I don't know if I should show your proposal or just show the agenda, Harry? I don't know what's easiest.
Well, I think just the agenda should be fine. Don't want to take too much time in the office hour right now. Last office hours we discussed the TLS proposal, sort of a little verbose. I heard a few things in the feedback. So I've incorporated a few, and we need more discussions on the other ones. The two changes I've done is, I think it seemed pretty unanimously. Everyone said, like, we don't need to include port for matching in TCP route. So essentially, if you have a TCP listener on a gateway, it will use a route selector to select a TCP route. In this case, it should only select one TCP route, because if you have multiple TCP routes, you will have a collision. So that seemed pretty straightforward. So that applies for TCP route and TLS route. Now, that proposal specifically does not introduce those types, but it's more about defining how matching behavior works. And then the second thing was, I think Bowie brought this up, and this was very interesting and a very important point, that what is the minimum that we can do inside route level for TLS. So now I think Rob, if you can go into the proposal, and in the table of content, scroll up, there is this TLS properties. It's in the bottom quarter. So yeah, right there. Here I've elaborated on the properties that are being introduced as part of this proposal in the gateway and in the route. And in the route, I've proposed that we can restrict this to have only certificate and key pair references inside the route. Everything else will be always controlled by the gateway level TLS properties. So that probably achieves some, like not making routes too complicated and still allowing for some use cases or user stories that we have, where application developers would like to specify TLS settings. So those are the two changes at a high level that I have made in this one. We definitely do want to discuss more if TLS and route is something we want to do or not. We right now don't have like a good consensus, I think, around it. Some people want it, some people are opposed to it. So.
Yeah, I would like to understand, if we allowed it, are there combinations that would become very tricky to understand or validate?
I see.
Like, I guess we would, it would be nice to see if we could write out a concise way to validate that the combination makes sense. Like if you had, you can delegate it, but then you probably can't have any config at the gateway level, or is there like only a wildcard there? It would be nice to, if we could work through those, because then it would make it very, like that would be my concern, is that like we can get into situations that are kind of tricky.
Yeah, so there are at least a few of those situations, and we need to be explicitly document at least the part that how conflict resolution works in those cases. So I can take those things where I can write up some examples of how if you have some domains that are being controlled by the gateway and some that are being dedicated, how they work well together and how they fail. So.
Yeah, like the ideal would be that for the tricky ones, we could basically disallow them, and it will be very obvious that why it was disallowed from a user perspective. Like the user can't easily end up generating these situations, and then when it happens, like they can understand why it's like not valid.
I see. Okay. This also goes into, I think, the conflict resolution discussion that we are about to have. So.
Oh yeah, I don't know. Well, I have to actually step out of this meeting, so maybe we can put it for tomorrow, unless you guys want to start it, and I can read the notes.
as far as conflict handling?
Yeah, I feel like that one maybe it might require a skeleton doc just to
I
organize
think
thoughts.
so. Yeah,
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 it's
I
a
think
big
think
you're
can
right.
of worm.
All right.
But
Was
that's
there
all
anything?
yeah, that's
Okay,
all I
great.
have here. I think, yeah, just looking for more feedback. If somebody hasn't had looked at it yet, then please take a look.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, definitely we'll take a look on our side. Please farm it out also to other folks, like especially users, just to get feedback more broadly.
Yep.
So, I think we can't go too deep into conflict handling without much structure, but maybe it would be worthwhile to just try to list off the different kinds of conflict we might need to handle, not necessarily how we would handle it, but places where things can conflict. And I am open to ideas here.
I mean, the first and most obvious one is, what happens when multiple things specify a domain name, the same domain name.
So multiple gateways at this point specify same domain name. And similarly, multiple routes specify the same path.
By we, I mean, James has documented what happens when multiple listeners share the same port. So there's been some documentation there. So that helps, how listeners can be deduplicated, or what's the word we use there? Collapsible, I think, or compatible.
Okay.
Mergeable.
Mergeable is a new one. So I guess we'll have 3 words for the same thing next.
Yeah. So I mean, we've talked before about config being mergeable on other calls, and so I think that is obviously a type of conflict resolution. So yeah, it's conceivable that might be an answer that you could give. But yeah, I think the obvious ones that came to me are the stuff that the current Ingress kind of is one of the things that sometimes people really like, that behavior where you can specify the same domain multiple times, and currently that gets merged. If you use, it depends on the controller obviously, but our old friend the Nginx controller, it will, for Ingress objects, will merge matching domain names and matching paths. So if you have 2 Ingress records that match on both the domain name and the path, at the end of the day, it'll end up load balanced across the 2 things.
Yeah, one interesting
right.
thing I think that we should cover is what happens when you have one route that is bad and the others are still good.
Yeah.
And you update the good one.
Yeah.
Is there
what does a route being bad mean?
Like it's just it's conflicting somehow. So the worst result is to basically say, oh, your thing is bad, and they just like take the whole thing out.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty hostile. Can we do something more nuanced there?
Yeah, so I mean, the stuff that we've had happen, like the way that we handle some of this in Contour, because the reason that conflict resolution is important is that the usual ways in which you would handle a conflict like this are not straightforward in Kubernetes. So if you wanted to do first right of win semantics, it's actually very difficult to do. And ways that you would determine which, if there is a conflict, which one wins is not straightforward. And that's why the conflict resolution behavior is really important.
Yes, and we probably need, I totally agree with Nick there, and we probably need like a general guiding principle as well, and as to how to decide conflict resolution. It's pretty hard to actually discuss each and every conflict here. So we generally have decided to go towards like whichever resource is the oldest. So using the created add field inside the resource, because there is no update field and there is no way to determine like what Nick just said. So we need some guiding principles as well to figure out.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things that we've seen is that, you can very easily end up in one of the reasons that we built HTTP proxy the way we did is to stop the problem that a lot of people saw with Ingress, where if you deploy something that conflicts with someone else and it's broken, then you can break a significant chunk of a working thing. And so I think that it feels to me like one of the guiding principles should be that you should, that there should be some way to prefer not to break things that are working.
Yeah, that makes sense.
How we do that, that is a hard problem. Yeah, but yeah, I think that feels like the right place to start to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Well,
in Contour, we specifically chose not to do that because it was too hard. So if you have a conflict in Contour, everything that's conflicted is invalid.
Got it.
Produces the exact opposite of that thing where, if you create a conflicting HTTP proxy, that happens to conflict on your main website, then guess what? You just took your main website down.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
That is tough.
Yes. And I mean, the idea originally was that only a small number of people should have access to the root HTTP proxies. And so that problem should be minimized. But in the event that people want it to be more magic, then you can't protect people against that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, I'm just thinking about other forms of potential conflict, and this, I don't know that this is, I don't know exactly how this would classify, but multiple gateways that target the same route. I don't think that's necessarily an issue, but it seems like something that we need to at least.
Yeah, we need to understand.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we had the idea originally that routes should be effectively composable, that you should be able to reuse a route in multiple places. That is a thing that happens for HTTP proxy. You can define a HTTP proxy that says, prefix / go to this app and call it app, the app HTTP proxy, and then you can import that effectively at different places in the path schema and have it work. The problem there is that then once you can do that, communicating where you're imported is really important and what conditions you're imported with and a whole bunch of other stuff like that.
Yeah. Maybe another thing worth discussing is things that have consistently been challenging with, let's say, the Ingress API or other APIs in this space where conflict resolution has been painful or not straightforward. So I know, like for Ingress, we for sure know that it's very difficult, or this is Kubernetes in general, it's very difficult to understand which was the last updated.
Yep.
Yeah, another thing with Ingress is how to, you could have the same SNI or host name pointing to different certificates, because you can because
that's a good one.
And that has been such a big pain, and it's still very hard to resolve. And we can actually land up in the same, like this currently what we have, it also has that gap that it can also do the same problem, create the same problem for us again.
Oh yeah. Yeah, how would we, since you are in the progress of writing TLS proposal, how could we avoid that?
So gateway, like having TLS only on gateway minimizes that to some extent. It still creates an issue where you could allow for a TLS certificate, one TLS certificate on, let's say, port 443, and another TLS certificate for the same SNI on port 448, right? And so that does create those issues, and I think most proxies cannot handle, like presenting different, like most proxies can actually handle presenting different certificates on different listeners. The real issue comes up when you delegate a TLS onto route, and this is what Poi was also referring to. If we can sketch out those situations, because as soon as you delegate it, now anybody can introduce a TLS certificate for foo.com in his route, and then someone else goes and creates the similar route, and we again have the same thing as Ingress V1. So in that case, we need sort of a guiding principle as to which one takes precedence, and how to highlight it. Do we fall back onto the certificate that is on the gateway? The current one, the current proposal always, I think, requires or at least recommends that you always have a default certificate on the gateway or a specific SNI, or maybe generally.
Yeah. Sorry, I just remembered something that is pretty relevant. We actually have a problem in Contour at the moment that we discovered, where that it's only relevant in that it can create weird problems for certificates. If you're doing a wildcard cert and you've got you're doing and you've got like individual SNIs that then route to different things, browsers aggressively will try to coalesce the connections, and what the way that it should work then is that when you hit the proxy asking for foo.com and it's the same IP as bar.com, your browser will say, oh, this domain name resolves to this IP, or no, basically what can happen is, if your browser is asking for something in one tab and it coalesces the connection for another tab to the same address, sometimes it'll try, and the proxy, the behavior it's supposed to do is to coalesce the connections and send them to the same place with the same with the same SNI, even though it's actually headed for a different place. And so basically what happens is you're supposed to issue, the proxy is supposed to issue a 421, a 421 misdirected request. And some browsers, Safari, don't handle that. And they will just show you the 421. Chrome and Firefox handle it fine, but Safari doesn't. So I just wanted to mention that is a thing that people should know about, because we had to do some stuff I was a bit sad about to make it work at all. And then it turns out that, Safari doesn't handle it properly. So we have to we're currently in the process of adding a way to turn off HTTP2 so that people who are trying to use wildcard certificates, don't run into this problem. Sorry, wanted to mention
wow.
that.
Yeah, that is tough. Oh,
it's one of those horrifying things that you don't discover until you need to discover it, and it's very surprising.
Yeah, I bet that sounds fun to debug.
Because so we had the problem where people were like, some I'm using a wildcard cert and some requests are just not working. It's like, okay. And then so it came down to the fact that browsers will do this aggressive connection coalescing. We actually had to add, because we use Envoy as the backend proxy, we actually had to add a Lua filter to the connections to check that the SNI and the host header match or something. James did.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So it was a bit gross, but we needed to do that. So because if you don't do that, then you can, and you turn on client certificate authentication, then you can connect to the proxy with any valid TLS session and bypass the client certificate authentication.
Yeah, this is super painful. Nginx does the opposite, where it does the same thing what the browser is doing to the upstream. It will multiplex multiple connections if they are if they're going to the same IP port tuple, then it will put all the requests for different SNIs on the same thing, and that bypasses client authentication.
Yes. Yeah, so we built a thing a while ago to stop that happening when we built client authentication, but then we found that you have this problem that causes this problem. So, yeah, the combination of client authentication and SNI can make things weird. Is I guess the headline that I wanted to say there.
Yeah, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Also, we wrote down prefer not to break things that are working. So in that section, is it like, there are sometimes issues where, you have a large object and like 5 ingress rules and only one of them is bad. And it's pretty hard to actually signal that only one resource is bad. So everything is classified as bad. So we probably want to also have some fine-grained mechanics to, like mechanisms to actually highlight that, okay, only one of the rules is bad, either remove it or fix it. That seems to be like a user friendliness feature.
Yeah, that comes down in my mind to the problem of defining the status, how the status behaves. I have been pushing some more on trying to get some more clarity from people around conditions, from SIG-Arch around conditions and what we should, the polarity, what the expected behavior is, all that sort of stuff. Still no agreement on the polarity stuff, which is what you would need to be able to make this stuff machine parsable. But one of the things that did come up out of that is something that you were talking to James about yesterday, Rob. That conditions, it seems that some, at least, of SIG architecture feel that conditions shouldn't appear and disappear. If a condition is valid on an object, it should always be there. It might be unknown, true, or false, but it should always be there. So
interesting.
Yeah. So I was like, oh, that's not how I thought of them earlier at all. And when I started realizing that was how some people thought of them, then it's like, well, okay, that's a reasonably big behavior change. But yeah, if you look at a lot of the core objects, that's how the core objects that have conditions, the conditions are always present, and they all, have different, just the true, false, unknown value will change.
Yeah, and I can see how that's helpful, especially, you think conditions have this idea of a last transition time. So yes. If you are trying to understand why something was broken 10 minutes ago, that might give you some idea.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the reason that this is relevant is because treating something that's partially valid, really the only way that you can do anything about that is for there to be a schema on the status that the controller can update to say, hey, your config is mostly good. Overall your thing is ready. But there are problems. There are specific problems. Because the problem is that almost all the conditions roll up into an overall ready condition, which is like everything's okay. But so if things are partially okay and if things are not okay, then that is a strong signal that something is seriously broken. And so, there's no real way to indicate things are mostly okay, but there's something you need to look at. Just that binary signal. So having other conditions there that you can say, well, ready means that at least some of the config is working, and if there's anything broken, then you'll be able to see it in the other conditions.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, is this leading to a place where we kind of define a minimum segment of a resource that needs to be valid for it to be at least partially valid? So as an example, one listener may be valid on a gateway and another one may not, but you still make that valid listener work?
Yeah, I think there needs to be some rules like must be one valid listener, must be one valid service for anything that routes to a service. There must be one valid target for anything that goes somewhere. Secret references must be complete. that there must be a secret at the other end, that sort of stuff. And then once you have those rules, you can write the conditions that tell you that the rules have been broken.
Yeah, that makes sense. And
Yeah,
to follow up with your condition discussion, I should, that's really interesting, and I should write a follow-up issue because it seems like it needs more discussion. And I was looking through the SIG-Arch cap around and formalizing conditions, and it does not seem to cover in any way these kinds of things, like if a condition should always exist, or if it should always be positive or negative. Like it does not seem to help with those questions that we have. And maybe at some point, if SIG-Arch isn't going to answer, which, if there's not going to be consensus there, maybe we just need to have consensus as a project that all our conditions will either be positive or negative.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what, but just so we have some consistency.
Yeah. So the guidance from the current API conventions say that conditions should be abnormal true polarity, i.e., if something is wrong, they are true.
Okay.
The folks from Knative did a whole bunch of UX research, and they found that when you actually show people abnormal true conditions, it's very hard to parse them initially, because it's kind of like the good state is a double negative.
Yeah.
Is error false? Like error present.
Yeah,
false.
and that,
like, so it's you've got to sit there for a second and be like, is that good or bad? Like, and so that's why Knative moved to positive ones where it's like everything good, true, ready, true, synchronized, true, that sort of thing. So that, if the things are false, then there's a problem. And so, that's why, and the current rule that, I can't remember what their name was. Sorry. I was reading it before this meeting, but it's still pretty early for me. So, Daniel, I think, Daniel Smith, he replied on one of the 4521 in the community repo is Evan from Knative's PR that was let's change the and I'll put it in the chat. It's a pull request. Pulls.
oh, cool.
So this originally was a change the recommended polarity to positive. And so there's been a lot of discussion on here, not much consensus. Well, it feels like there's a bit of a split in SIG architecture anyway. But so the latest thing is that Daniel, you can see there's a lot of backwards and forwards here.
Okay.
So this is so polarities for people. So state the condition in a natural way for humans to understand. And then absent means you don't know the value, and you also don't know if the setting is running. Setters of conditions should set the condition for the objects they're attempting to monitor straight away. So that's like conditions should always be present once your controller has seen it.
Yeah, this is helpful. Thank you for bringing this up. I feel like the question I asked in Slack the other day was already kind of weighted in a bad way, because I was asking about a condition that didn't make any sense in a false state. The condition no such gateway class equal false is very confusing. Like you were saying with Knative, like that. How do you understand that as someone looking?
No such gateway class false is that the gateway class is actually valid.
Right. It seems bizarre. And so if that's always going to exist, then you want different conditions. So
that's why I sort of said that the approach, and I'm probably going to actually try and write a response to this to say, if conditions should always exist, it actually makes more sense for them to be positive polarity. It's easier to read if they are positive polarity, because then it's like everything is good, true is what you want to see. You just want to see true. And then it's easier to parse them. It's easier to understand what they're doing as a person.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean that's super relevant to the thing we were originally talking about because the only way to communicate partial validity is through the use of something like conditions. Even if you were to build something separate, it would use a similar mechanism.
Yeah. Yeah, that is very helpful. Huh. Yeah, I'll have to spend some time thinking about that, but I know our conditions right now do not currently, or at least the conditions I've added, do not currently follow this guidance, but I like the idea.
Yeah, this is one of the reasons why I have been holding off doing any condition stuff with Contour until I can get something resolved here, because so that I don't need to rewrite everything.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're lucky with service APIs that everything is alpha anyway, and we can be like, yes, we completely changed everything. Sorry.
Right. Yeah, hopefully we can get to V1 Alpha 1 and then have some kind, not a backwards compat guarantee, but at least be a little slower to break things. But right now, while we can break things, it'd be great to get status right.
Yes, exactly.
So, yeah. Was there anything else we wanted? I guess maybe the right question is, what are the next steps for this conflict handling semantic discussion? Like there's a lot of different things we can cover here. Maybe we could dig through what happens in every single one of these potential conflicts, or what's happened. Like maybe we need to discuss each of these individually and how we would avoid these potential problems or handle these conflicts. Or maybe we need to first define in some way, whether it's in documentation or what our guiding principles are. Like the prefer not to break things that are partially valid should be parsed and used however possible. So, okay, maybe this,
I think that's the place to start, yeah.
Okay.
Harry, sorry, you were talking.
Yeah, so I want that, and I think so since we are all writing different controllers and all of our controllers have different behaviors, what we could do is we can take a couple of common examples that are present in most implementations, and we all have some experience around it, and then we share how we think the conflict resolution should work. So with that, we can arrive at sort of a shared understanding, and then derive the sort of guiding principles based on those. Because we can have high-level guiding principles, but then our understanding still could be very different. And then when we go and actually try to answer questions, how should conflict resolution happen in this case where a route is clashing between gateways or something, and then we come with different answers. So doing that exercise probably could help.
Yeah, that sounds useful. What do you think the best form for that is? Is it like a GitHub issue kind of discussion?
More of probably like a Google Doc, I think. So we can put down two cases of these are the resources that we have. They are conflicting, and how do implementers feel about resolving this? Like, what is the best possibility?
Okay. Yeah, that seems like a reasonable starting point. Are you, by any chance, volunteering to start that?
I have got 2 proposals. I have no bandwidth right now.
Okay, so. That's completely fine. Yeah, you've been doing a lot. Okay. Well, maybe what we can do, I think we're generally in agreement on the very high level guiding principles. So maybe we can set those in somewhat stone, just the idea. I think it is a relatively unique concept that partially valid objects or resources should be treated, should be parsed and should be handled as long as there's sufficient information in them to get some validity. So maybe even just starting that discussion and making sure that there's enough support for that approach is good. And then we can go from there and talk about different how different implementations are currently handling conflict resolution and maybe try and find some common ground.
Yep, that sounds good to me.
Same
Okay.
here.
Cool. That's great. Anyone wanting to volunteer to start that discussion? If not, I can try and give it a shot. Cool. I will take that one on. And then the last thing on our agenda today was just if we could schedule some time to read through the API spec. This was an idea that James had, and maybe I'll wait till I get a chance to talk with him again, because I know he would want to be involved. But it was a good idea. It was basically at some point in the not too distant future, we should just spend some time together just reading through the current types.go and make sure we haven't missed something really obvious. And maybe that takes place in an upcoming office hours, and we just announce its schedule a bit in advance, because it would be a bit different than your usual office hours. But yeah, I think this would be helpful for everyone as we're approaching that V1 Alpha 1 release, or I hate to say final, but some form of API stability. It would be great to make sure we're all aware of everything we currently have in the spec.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's probably fair to say that V1 Alpha 1 will be the first implementable version.
Yes. Yeah.
There's enough behavior there that you can actually make a controller to implement the behavior.
Yep. That is the goal. Is there anything else that we should cover today, or should we just give everyone their 9-10 minutes left back? Yeah, I think this has been very helpful. I will take it as an action item to go through and just create an issue. I'll start with an issue just to discuss this a bit, and if there's consensus, maybe turn it into a PR. I'm not entirely sure how that will go from there, but just to get this concept to a wider audience.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sounds good to me.
All right. Well, thanks. Talk to you later.
Talk to you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.